right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the HCD Annual Progress Report Dashboard Roundtable. My name is Lyle Janisek, and I'm a Senior Regional Planner in the Sustainable and Resilient Development Department here at SCAG. I have the pleasure to introduce our presenter this afternoon. Tom Brinkhuis is a Senior Housing Data Specialist with the Department of Housing and Community Development. During his 9 years with HCD, he has led the collection of annual progress reports, the sixth cycle regional housing needs allocation process, and worked to review housing elements for jurisdictions across the state. Tom continues to develop data tools such as the APR dashboard in order to make HCD's data more available and accessible. Tom has a bachelor's degree in geography from Sacramento State University. Before I hand it over to our special guest, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules with today's webinar. So please keep yourselves muted unless you are called upon to ask a question. You may ask questions throughout the presentation, or you could wait till the end during the Q&A session. And additionally, you may drop your questions into the chat box, or feel free to raise your hand at any time, and we will call upon you to ask your question. So without further ado, I am happy to introduce Tom Brinkhuis.
Great, thanks, Lyle. Let me go ahead and share my screen for folks. Let's see here, start with my PowerPoint. I'll probably be flipping back and forth between PowerPoint and then to my browser window where I'll be actually demoing the dashboard for you all. So hopefully that goes smoothly. But yeah, thank you all for joining the roundtable on our annual progress report data dashboard. So HCD is very, excited to be able to produce data tools like this, particularly with the data that we're receiving on the annual progress report, in order to make it more available and accessible to everyone. Let me see if I can close this here. Okay, so annual progress reports. So what is an annual progress report? So some of you may be familiar with what this report is. Others may not. If you don't, just a quick refresher. So state law requires that every local government complete this report and send it to HCD by April 1st of every year. What is this a report on? It is a report on the implementation of the local government's housing element. So it's, really a report on the implementation of their programs, and, a lot of other things. The reporting requirements have been significantly expanded in recent years with legislation. So the size of the APR has grown, and the content that each report contains has also grown. And maybe most of interest to this group is the report contains information on all housing units in various stages of production. So that includes units that have been issued building permits, units that have, construction has been completed and the certificate of occupancy has been issued. We'll go through all that as we go through the dashboard. It contains information on the different types of different structure types of housing developments. It contains information on the affordability of those units. It includes identifiers like the parcel number, the housing that the housing development is located on, the address, as well as key dates that are sort of, when those development activities have occurred. So really there is a wealth of data in each APR that we have received. So I will go now to the actual dashboard itself so I can walk you all through sort of a live look at what it can do. So just an overview. A caveat with this data is, of course, this data is self-reported by cities and counties. HCD does not, we do not independently verify the data. We do some things on our end to ensure that each APR form is complete. So all sort of required data fields are completed. But as far as the accuracy of the data, we currently do not, evaluate that. So with that said, oh, is there a question already?
Yeah, not yet, Tom. I was just going to say, I
Oh.
think we're just seeing your PowerPoint at the moment.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah.
It's all good.
I knew that might be tricky. Let me stop sharing. Share a different window. Okay. So hopefully you all can see that now.
Yep.
Okay, so like I mentioned, housing in various stages of activity. So we are collecting data on the housing development pipeline. So there's 4 different milestones that we are collecting data on as far as housing development. That is when the housing development application was submitted to the local planning or building agency or building department. So when that application was submitted and deemed complete by the reviewing, the reviewing department or the staff person that's reviewing it, when the housing development was approved or entitled, so when they received all necessary approvals before they could get the building permit, then when that building permit was issued, and then finally when the construction was completed and a certificate of occupancy was issued. So right now we're seeing data for 2021. So this is all of the housing units that are sort of currently, that have been reported on the 2021 APR year in various stages of development. The dashboard's interactive, so if you're interested in a specific structure type, a specific type of tenure like renter or owner occupied, a specific year, the data set does go back to 2018 for this. If you're interested in a particular jurisdiction or a particular county. So I'll probably spotlight LA County just, because we're partnering with SCAG on this, but everything, if you select something for LA County, then all of the data is updated accordingly. Of course, you can select multiple, multiple data points. So like right now I'm looking at LA County accessory dwelling units for the year 2021. And this is what was reported by every jurisdiction in LA County that we received an APR from. So that sort of spotlights, a little bit of the data that we're collecting around, the units, and affordability is also listed on this page as well. So you can see the units broken down by affordability level. So that's really the sort of the key figures that we are collecting on this annual progress report, highlighted on the first page. With the second page, we dig into the data a little more, and this page spotlights the amount of time it takes for a housing development to go from one of those activities to the next. So you can see that we can view the data by the amount of time it takes to go from a housing unit being submitted and deemed complete to the time that it's issued an entitlement. Same with the amount of time it takes to go from being entitled to being permitted, finally from being permitted to being completed. And we do have this broken out by, various ways that you can kind of slice and dice the data. We do have an average that's spotlighted on the line chart here, which is, I think if we're looking at state priorities as far as housing production, the goal is to reduce the average time that it takes for projects to go from one stage to the next, to, you know, basically try to help address the housing problems that the state is currently facing. So we do have some jurisdictions spotlighted here too on sort of the jurisdictions that sort of take longer. They're at the top of the chart here, and I can, you know, go to the different activities, and it is really interesting to sort of play around with this, and, you know, look at the data at the county level. Let's look at LA just for fun, and see where they fit in on the amount of time it takes for permitted to completed. So we see the jurisdictions that are taking longer, the average time frame, sort of trending down. This is only over the last 18 months at this point, but yeah. And then with any of these data points, if I clicked on one, like let's say I'm interested in Palos Verdes Estates, they're at the top, not to pick on anyone, but let's say I'm interested in them. I can click on them, and then I can click on view data. And then it will take me to a page where I can actually see the housing developments that they've reported on the annual progress report, along with those key dates. And this, you know, sort of shows the timeline here, and we see, you know, some timelines for these various projects. So that is, yeah, so this is kind of a fun a fun page to kind of play around with. The next page is just more sort of charts and stats on construction by various income categories. So the income categories, the 4 statutorily prescribed income categories for the regional housing need determination. That's what we are tracking here. So very low income, moderate, and above moderate income. This is just total units, and we can chart them by the 4 different activities here that we are collecting information on. So just provides a little more granularity into the data around housing production. The bar chart here is just the list of jurisdictions that have reported the most units for this category. Right now it's completed. I can change it to permitted. You know, the jurisdictions at the top of the list tend to, you know, be on the top. They're, you know, usually the biggest jurisdictions are going to be reporting the most units. So that sort of tracks. Again, I can view the data. So if I'm interested in Los Angeles, right now I just clicked on it. I have completed selected here, and then I can go to view data, and then I will again see all the data reported for Los Angeles for the you know, selections that I made on the previous page. This is almost like the raw data that they submitted on the APR itself. So you do have a chance to view that. There is some capability in here of looking at the data by various geographies as well. So if I, yeah, I can look by region. So you can see the SCAG regions at the top. I can drill down to different geographic levels. I believe county is also on here as well. But yeah, again, you know, if I clicked on that, then, you know, I would, actually, I can't view the data for a region. So I guess that's only limited to the jurisdiction level. So, hey, that's a potential enhancement for an update, which we will be, of course, working on an update. The next page are the maps, and 2 maps are shown here. We have a map of the lower income housing production compared to the total units. That's the sort of the shape map with all the boundaries on the left. The darker color means they're permitting more of the units that they've reported are indicated as being for lower income. And then the dot map on the right is actually the location of every housing unit that was reported. So we can really get into some cool detail on the dot map. If I zoomed into, LA County, let's just click on it here. Everything will update, and I can start to see the spatial location of where all of the housing units have been reported on the APR. Let me change the year to 2021, just so it it's a fewer of those, and then I can go to accessory dwelling units just to kind of whittle it down even more, and I can start to see where all of the ADUs in the LA County area where they've been reported. So it's kind of cool. You can, when you look at the data like this, you can actually start to see, individual subdivisions kind of start to get built out, like when the application for the units came in, when the building permit was issued, and then when they're finally completed. So we are getting that level of granularity on this chart. And then finally, just to finish off the construction topic, because units by structure type, this is tracking the amount of units that have been reported in the various structure types that we're tracking. The notable, I think, data point here is the increase in the accessory dwelling unit category. Kevin kind of alluded to this during his presentation, but really there's been a big takeoff in the ADU category. That's the blue category here, which is seeing an increase on the bar chart, and I can spotlight that if I click on accessory dwelling unit, and I can see that the numbers really have shot up, with LA being, at the top of the list for building permits. And this particular page is only building permits issued, and that's why we're able to go back all the way to 2013, because we do have permit data going back to then. So with that, the other thing that we're tracking and that local governments are required to report on in this report is their progress in meeting the regional housing need allocation. So if you're interested in what is the allocation for a particular region, what is the allocation for a particular local government, we do have those numbers on here. Hopefully it will make it easier to look up those numbers. We do have the 5th and the 6th cycle here. So right now it's only showing for at the regional level. If I was interested in the SCAG region, I could click on them, and then I could expand this down. Then we see it at the county level, and then we finally see it at the local level. So these are just the RHNA numbers themselves, but the next page, if I go to total permits, is where we start to see the units reported compared to the RHNA that was issued to them. So 6th cycle just started for a lot of jurisdictions, so there's not going to be a lot of progress made in the numbers thus far. But if we go back to the 5th cycle, we can start to see, the amount of permits that have been issued, total permits versus total RHNA. These percentages here, so you see percent of the RHNA attained. You can compare that to the sort of the percent through the cycle. How far through the housing element planning cycle are they? you can kind of compare and you can say, okay, well, they've met, you know, if they're equal, then they're, you know, they're on pace to meet it, right? If they're below, then they're not quite on pace. If they're above, then they're exceeding the RENA pace. If I just clicked on LA, right, I could see that, okay, for the total RENA, LA's attained 166.7% of it. So more than on track. But when I go to the progress page, this is where we see the numbers actually broken down by the 4 different income categories. And that this really kind of tells more of a story on housing production. So, you know, if I clicked on LA County and I'm, you know, clicked on Los Angeles, and I could dig into the numbers and I could say, okay, wow, that, you know, the above moderate, they've really, you know, exceeded the RENA that was assigned to them for the 5th cycle, but, you know, still behind on the very low and low, which you know, is the story around the state. Definitely not limited to LA in this case, but this page is a good place to kind of, you know, look up these numbers, and the 6th cycle numbers will get built out as more jurisdictions go into their 6th cycle planning period and start submitting data relevant to that one. So with that, you know, just a couple other interesting data points that you can quickly look up. You can look up the housing element or compliance or certification, who has their housing element certified, who doesn't, which housing elements are currently under review, and so forth. So you can look that up on this page. Who has submitted their annual progress report? And actually, this is a very important page right here, because if we didn't get a report for that jurisdiction, then we don't have any data for them. And so they're going to be missing from all those unit counts, all those charts that were on previous pages. If they didn't complete their APR, yeah, we won't have data for them for that year. So the good news is that we do have APRs for, you know, the vast majority of the state. So you can see the most recent year, 2021, we have 505 annual progress reports. There's 539 local governments in the state. So we don't have one for everyone yet. We're getting closer. That's definitely a goal for us, but we haven't quite reached it. Another page is around SB 35. SB 35 was a bill that passed several years ago that allowed certain housing developments to be approved ministerially based on progress toward meeting their RENA goals. So this is tracking those projects. Was an application for the project submitted? Was the project issued building permits, and so forth? And so you can see the projects that were reported that used SB 35 on this page here. And finally, just another page, and this is more narrative reporting requirement in the annual progress report, but it's a report out on all the housing element programs. So this is, you know, narrative descriptions on how they're doing in implementing the programs that they committed to, you know, completing during their housing element cycle at some point. So yeah, I can do a text search on here. So let's say I'm interested in programs that committed to do some rezoning. I could do a search and I could find every program that had the word rezone in the program status. Again, you know, I could filter this by jurisdiction. If I'm only interested in one jurisdiction, then that's, you're able to view that. There is a user guide as well, which just, kind of checks the boxes on explaining a few things. I'll go back to the PowerPoint here and talk a little bit more about what might be coming in the future to this dashboard and how you can get the data for this dashboard that we used to create it. So, okay, I will. Okay, so future additions. The housing element sites inventory. We are collecting digital sites inventories now. So that is every site that the local government identified as being suitable to accommodate some portion of their RENA, whether it be lower income or moderate or above moderate income. We now have that in electronic format. So data on the general plan designation, data on the zoning, data on if it's going to be rezoned, data on its availability and access to, data on the access to infrastructure, and several other things, how many units the site can accommodate, any constraints on the site. So that information is being collected digitally now, and so that can hopefully be a future addition to this dashboard, or just another standalone dashboard. That's yet to be determined, but look for that data to be put in a format like this in the future. SB 9, so that's lot splits and duplexes in single family zones. Local governments are required to now report requests to do those lot splits and create those units on the annual progress report. So this year, 2022, is the first year that the legislation is in effect. So we will be getting that data in 2023 and on the reports that are reporting out on this year. So look for that. And then also more information on housing developments with a density bonus. So more detail around the types and number of incentives that were granted, the amount of the density bonus granted. So there's been more interest in sort of, analyzing the effectiveness of the state density bonus law and any local density bonus ordinances, and seeing what incentives are, being granted most often, and parking, if parking reductions are being requested, that sort of thing. So we will be adding that data to this as well. So the dashboard, is great, but the dashboard, you can't export the data directly from that dashboard at this time. Maybe you're interested in the data, but you're not interested in sort of the stuff that we've created on the dashboard, the charts. You want to make your own, right? So how do you do that? Well, we do have all of the APR data available for download. That data is available on the California Open Data Portal. So that is a website that's run by the California Department of Technology. And we have all of the data tables available on that website. And so so open data, I'll give a quick plug on open data. Open data, it's made available by HCD for anyone to use. This is helping to implement HCD's 10-year data strategy, which was contained in the statewide housing plan. The data strategy lays out a vision for how data can be used to enforce existing housing laws and inform policymaking and implementation. And so one of the chief priorities for that is really enabling the data access. Yeah, so with that, just a little more detail on our data on the open data portal. Hopefully it's easy for everyone to be able to access. The data is in a CSV format, so that's the raw data. The open data portal does provide API functionality, so you can connect to the data source directly via API. There's additional documentation like the data dictionaries and metadata, which give a little more information about the data. Data dictionaries in particular can be very helpful in figuring out what each column is what it contains. And this will be updated at least monthly. Now, I think it'll probably be updated a little more frequently during the time when we start to get a lot of these APRs submitted to us. So in the springtime, lots of these APRs are starting to come in. The data set is updated more frequently. And so we'll probably post updates to the open data portal on more of a, maybe a weekly basis during that time. So, yeah, so with that, give some key takeaways on some of the APR data. Hopefully the data is, useful for you all in your work. The data does provide data on housing production in various stages of development. So that's units that have been submitted for approval, units that have been approved or entitled, units that have been issued a building permit, and finally units that have been completed or issued a certificate of occupancy. The data can give insight into the effectiveness and utilization of various housing policies, such as inclusionary ordinances, which I kind of forgot to mention, but we do have data on units that were produced with inclusionary ordinances, state density bonus, ADUs, SB 35. I mentioned SB 9 is coming. And then to give you a preview for things a couple of years away, I didn't put it in writing on here because the governor still hasn't signed it, I don't believe, but SB 6 and AB 2011 bills that permit housing in commercial zones. Those bills also require tracking those units on the annual progress report and reporting it to HCD. So hopefully that's another data point that we'll be able to add to this dashboard down the road when we start getting that data come in, provided those bills are signed. The geographic identifiers that are included in the data set are can be very helpful for doing analysis of sort of the spatial distribution of housing. Where is housing being proposed? Where is housing being built? Again, that's the parcel number as well as the street address. And with that, I have some questions. I just put out a couple questions for y'all to think on. What enhancements to the dashboard would be insightful for you all? What additional data points could be included on the annual progress report itself that would be most valuable to your work? So maybe just some things to think on, and then I'll give just a quick plug for our email list. You can sign up on our website. We have social media, so you can follow HCD on social media. HCD is always hiring too. So if you're interested in getting a state job, then you can always, yeah, look to HCD. Yeah, and with that, I'm not sure if there's any questions, but happy to take them.
Great. Tom, we did have one come through in the chat. I'll just read it out loud for everyone. One of the recommendations in your data strategy was considering a number of options for a statewide permit system. Do you know if conversations have gotten started in earnest on that internally? The idea seems intriguing for automation, real-time data, tracking individual projects over time, time to completion, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I don't believe that conversations have gotten discussed in earnest, or serious conversations at this point. This is definitely a goal for us. If not an actual statewide system, then a system that can integrate easily with other systems that are being used. So no real updates on that front. There's sort of a lot of discussions happening with HCD broadly around our IT needs and capabilities and our systems. And, I think, some of that needs to get settled, and, that the need that we have to implement the data strategy is definitely, being communicated in those discussions, but no real progress to report on that front at this time.
Great. We did have another question just come through from Chris Williamson. It says, for REAP 2.0, any suggestions for how APR data can be used for multiple cities, sub-regional, to reveal patterns or anything like that?
That's a good question. I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with REAP. Unfortunately, I haven't been a big part of those discussions. If maybe you want to elaborate a little more on that, maybe I could help you out, but I'm not entirely sure what that might entail.
Yeah, Chris, if you're interested, you're welcome to unmute to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, I just did. Thank you. You can hear me, I guess?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, REAP 2.0, the big push is to help cities implement their housing elements and the programs that lead to infill development, reduction of VMT, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. Those are the three must-do criteria to have a project qualify for REAP 2.0, and this is at like a council of government level. Okay, looking at multiple jurisdictions in a county, for example. So sub-regional, and I'm tasked with coming up with projects, how to spend money basically in a useful way to help individual cities by looking at sort of sub-regional, looking at multiple city data, presuming it's in your database, and that suggests, maybe there's a pattern or there's cross-jurisdictional patterns going on that no one jurisdiction can see because they're not looking at the other jurisdiction and what's happening next door. But this data allows you to look at a larger area to, like you can imagine two cities both putting a lot of housing right up against their borders and kind of not knowing that the other city has a whole bunch of new housing next to them, and they're both doing the same thing, and that's fine, but it overloads the school right there, right? And the poor school district's got to handle all of that. So one idea I had was to, as you suggested, Tom, map the sites in a housing element that have been zoned for housing or submitted as part of the housing element, specific list of properties, map those, and then map your APR data and see what's going on, right? are all the sites being used? Are only some of them being used? It's kind of early. So that's a potential project. And then some other, just trying to think of different ways to use this data to help implement the housing elements. So theoretically, HCD signs off on these projects at REAP 2, which is, a whole pile of money. And there's some set aside for councils of governments to do this kind of cross-jurisdictional help. And it's all new to us. And I'm just beginning to think about what kinds of projects I got to write up to spend some money in a good way, though. And if you have any ideas, by all means, I think everybody would be welcome that at all the councils of governments, especially, I'm only thinking of SCAG, but I'm sure there's REAP 2 money all over the state for this kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're definitely on the right track with those housing element sites inventories. You can track those sites that have been identified, and there is an AFFH requirement now in the housing element sites inventory. So you do have that ability to look at those sites, and if they are located in areas that would promote AFFH. You can also look at where rezoning is proposed to occur. Is rezoning proposed to occur in those areas that are, AFFHing or not? And then you can also track sites that actually have been rezoned already, and look at the location of those. Are housing developments that have been reported on the APR are they cited on those sites that are furthering those objectives? So I think there's a lot of different data points that you could probably look at as far as that goes. Yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head, but hopefully that helps.
If I could have a second question, which I was going to type anyway, have you or will you or HCD compare your data to other data sources? I'm thinking of the Census Bureau's survey of permits, and just to kind of ground truth what you're getting against some other data source at some point. Yeah.
No, we do some just kind of some in-house ad hoc comparisons to data that's produced by the Census Bureau on building permits, as well as the CURB data, and certainly not identical to what both of those agencies are producing, but certainly in the ballpark. I think ours are on the high end. I think the census is on the low end, and CURB is kind of in the middle. At least that's how it, the last time I did the comparison, that's kind of how it shook out. I haven't done a comparison yet with the certificates of occupancy with the data that Department of Finance collects, but that is on the list of things to do, just to identify the veracity, and sort of touching on that with linking that to some legislation that is waiting to be signed, but there is a bill that does direct HCD to, it gives HCD the ability to conduct more review on these APRs, request corrections to the APRs, reject an APR, if it's just, it's just not meeting the reporting requirements, but we are going to do some more by way of identifying data that may not jive with what we're seeing from other sources. So yeah, we will be doing more of that.
Okay, thanks for those two answers.
Great. Another question we have from Caesar is zoning capacity or base zoning capacity by jurisdiction available in this kind of APR data set?
Zoning capacity, no, not directly. That would, you know, the closest thing we may get to that at some point is adding in those housing element sites inventories that I talked about. You know, then you can get a sense of all of the, you know, the capacity and zone capacity for sites that have been included in the housing element. Of course, that, you know, that's only sites that have been included in the housing element. That's not for the whole jurisdiction. So we will strive to add that data as more of those sites inventories come into us.
Great. One of the questions I had was looking at the data sets, you know, 2018 to 2021 is kind of the best kind of data. But even then, there were some jurisdictions that the data set's built off of what people submit and what cities submit. My question, especially for some of our jurisdictions, is say they have kept records of you know, maybe 2018, but they never submitted it. Is there a way for them to resubmit or just, you know, change and update the data? Because yeah, that might be.
Yes, good question. Yes, definitely. If there are revisions to an old APR that you would like to make to us, submit to us, yes, please do that. You can contact us at apr@hcd.ca.gov. We will accept the report. Your data will be updated. So if you have more units to report for towards your RENA progress, we'll count them. Yeah, we'll count them.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Is there anyone else on the line that might have a few questions, or if you wanted to go back to that one slide that showed, you know, your two questions that you kind of posed, you know, what are people wanting? Might spur some conversation and feedback.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah. So just take. I don't know. Can y'all see that, or did it go black?
It went black on our end.
I'll just leave it like this since full screen is not cooperating. So yeah, any additional data points? One data point that I think would be very helpful is if a housing development was located on a site that was included in the housing element. So that may be coming at some point, but just instead of having to do some like cross-check of parcel numbers and see if a parcel number in this data set matches a parcel number in this data set, you know, a yes, no, right? It was the housing development located on site included in the housing element? Yes, no. So that I think that would be helpful. And yeah, as far as enhancements, I think we're going to do more by way of just making the navigation a little easier, adding more filters for regions. Right now, most pages only have a county filter. You can select multiple counties at once, but you know, you have to fully control and you have to, you know, search for the counties that you want to select. So I will be adding in a regional filter. So, you know, if you're interested in just, you know, the whole SCAG region, you can select that. I think that's on a couple pages, but I'll be adding that to all of the pages at some point soon.
Great. I didn't see it in during the presentation, and maybe it exists, but are there elements on certain pages where, like, if you want to submit a correction, or is that only coming from jurisdictions, or
Oh, if somebody
yeah.
like a member of the public wanted to submit a correction, or
Yeah, if they like were perusing through it and saw something that was wrong that they knew was wrong, is there a route that they could go to submit like a revision, or should they contact, say, their local jurisdiction or what have you?
I mean, if you're just a member of the public and you notice something is wrong, I definitely recommend reaching out to the local jurisdiction. You can certainly reach out to us. We will then reach out to the local jurisdiction. So we do have the APR email. Anybody can send us an email. So if you notice something that's wrong, yeah, feel free to send us an email. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of reaching out to the local jurisdiction, but if you don't want to do that, if you just want to go to HCD directly, that's okay too.
Great. Let's see. Oh, we just had another one come in. A challenge for us to match APR data with our own data is project identifier, typically an APN. Part of it is that the data type is up to interpretation. So some jurisdictions write numbers, others write strings or sequences of strings. Any plans of enforcing identifier field data types for this critical field? Data strategy does mention the option of a statewide parcel data set, which might address this issue if projects were reported relative to one parcel data set. I know it is a hard problem, but one we always struggle with as we work with the data. So any response to that, Tom?
Well, I mean, just speaking on the APR data set, the data types, I mean, the APR form is just an Excel document. The data type for that particular column, I believe, is just a string. And when you download the CSV file, I don't think there's any sort of set data type on the CSV. I think if you're, at least for me, there's software that you can use where you can sort of specify a data type once you bring it into the software. So maybe that could help. Another thing that I'll just mention briefly is there will be a mapping tool that will be released soon by Department of General Services, another state agency, but they're using a lot of our data, a lot of HCD data on the housing element sites inventories, locally owned surplus land, and they will they are doing some of that parcel number sort of verification, I guess you would say, to verify that it is a real parcel number, and that's in the assessor's books. So not sure if that totally addresses the question, but when DGS releases that, there'll be even more data available on housing sites. And that should be coming soon. So look for that in the next few weeks, I think.
Awesome. Would that be one of the notifications that comes out if you were to subscribe to the HCD page, or?
Yes.
Great. So just another plug to subscribe to that if you're interested in that data.
Yes.
Great. We have about 5 minutes left. So are there any other questions, comments, or any feedback you'd like to provide, Tom, regarding the APR dashboard? Not seeing anything coming through the chat, or no raised hands at the moment, but So without further ado, let's go ahead and give him a great virtual round of applause. And then we can conclude this this PowerPoint. But Tom, if you'd like to stick around for the next couple minutes, and if there are people that want to ask questions after the fact, I think that might be a good opportunity. Yeah, so feel free to hop off if folks don't want to stick around for a little bit longer. But we do have a comment from Carl. Having done part of the housing element submittal for Bakersfield, one problem that I have seen is that APNs transitive in growing areas are transitive in growing areas. So, yeah.
Yes, that's definitely an issue. I think that we've seen I know DGS is running into that too, with trying to match these numbers. So yeah, it can be a challenge working with parcel numbers for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why on that map I just geocoded all the addresses. I'm like, I'm not trying to match parcel numbers. Like, I'll just take the address and plot that one on a map, and that's
Chris from Ambag says, will this presentation be available to attendees? Or will this be part of the recording? I know we are recording this specific session. I think Kevin is no longer on this call. I do believe we will be posting recordings of this, and I believe we are also going to be sharing the presentations after the fact. Yep. Jennifer, our AV staff, says the recordings will be posted for sure. So typically with that, we post the PowerPoints as well. And expect you'll probably get a follow-up email after next week, the second part 2. We have everyone's contact information for folks that RSVP'd, and typically we send a follow-up email giving you links to where a lot of this information can be found. So be on the lookout for that. But other than that, I just want to give a big thank you to Tom for presenting today on the APR dashboard. I know I've used APR data quite a bit, and it's exciting to see all the advancements that have come over the last couple of years. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And with that, we can just conclude today's presentation. So thank you all for everyone that attended, and we look forward to seeing you all next Thursday for part 2 of this demographic workshop. So thank you all for joining.
Okay, thanks everyone.